Hey guys, tonight we step softly into the velvet-draped world of Tudor England. You're standing at the threshold of a royal bedchamber, massive oak doors barely ajar. The corridor behind you hushed and cold. Inside the air is heavy, scented not with rot or ruin but with dense waves of sandalwood and clove, as if someone is trying just a little too hard to cover something up. It's the year 1547. Candles flicker along the far wall, their light bouncing off golden embroidery and aging tapestries. A fire crackles in the hearth, but it feels more ceremonial than warm. The windows are sealed tight against the January chill. Everything here feels thick. The heat, the silence, the expectancy. You take a few steps in. The bed is colossal, draped in deep crimson with a canopy that seems to sag slightly from the weight of time. There's a figure under the covers, motionless, breathing slow and shallow. You recognize him. Everyone does. Once the most commanding man in all of Europe, Henry VIII now lies here quiet, contemplative, and far from the boisterous huntsman he once was. You probably wouldn't enjoy being his physician. A cluster of attendants in discreet livery moves along the room's edges like shadows. One pours something warm into a goblet. Another adjusts a tapestry to catch the rising warmth. No one speaks above a whisper. You sense that no one has spoken loudly here in weeks, maybe months. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your local time and where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air in the king's chamber feels as though it hasn't changed in hours. Even the candles burn with a sort of tired dignity. You notice the king's chest rising and falling, the breath slow and deep. It's not sleep. It's something closer to waiting. The room is beautifully kept. Polished wood, silk cushions, inlaid motifs of lions and Tudor roses. But there's something unspoken beneath the perfection. No one says it out loud, but the king's condition has entered a phase beyond comfort, and you're just here to observe, to drift through like a curious spirit. Outside, the courtyard is blanketed with frost. Every footstep on the cobbles echoes, and those echoes are carefully avoided. Servants time their movements so they don't overlap. Food is brought on padded trays, the old bell that once rang to summon. The king's huntsman now hangs, silent and forgotten in a shadowed alcove, and still inside the incense burns. Frankincense, a little rosemary, perhaps myrrh. It's hard to say. The mixture is almost sweet, almost cloying, almost, let's be honest, a message everything is fine. Historians still debate whether this heavy scent was meant more for comfort or concealment. After all, appearances in court were everything. The strength of the king had to seem constant, even as it slipped away. You hear the scrape of metal. A small tray is being removed. The king has taken broth or tried to. Someone mutters, "Thanks to God." The chaplain sits quietly with a book in hand, not reading, not praying, just holding. One of the court scribes is tucked into a corner, quietly recording the daily observations. Even now, protocol endures. The royal calendar has not stopped. Documents must be signed. Approvals must be made, even if someone else is guiding the pen. There's a quiet pride in the room's restraint. No one cries. No one fidgets. But the stillness carries weight. It's not just respect, it's preparation. The kind of silence that comes not when something has ended, but when everyone knows the end is near. You take one more step forward. The fireplace pops. The king stirs just slightly and a footman adjusts a cushion. Then all is still again. You don't belong here, not really. But tonight you're going to stay. You're still standing at the edge of that room, and yet somehow you're drifting further into its memories. Now your attention turns to the paintings on the far wall. They're older now, familiar portraits rendered in oils that have dulled over time. There he is, Henry, the Golden Prince. Shoulders squared, eyes bright, chest puffed like a man born to command the world. He's painted not as he is now, but as he once was, broad-shouldered, athletic, and radiating the kind of charm that made ambassadors take notice. That version of the king still lingers in many minds. In the early years of his reign, Henry was a walking embodiment of England's hopes. Multilingual, musical, fond of hunting and dancing, and known to dominate a joust with flourish and ease. You wouldn't have guessed then that a man like that would one day need to be hoisted into his chair with pulleys. Historians still debate whether his decline began with a single injury, perhaps the infamous jousting accident of 1536, when Henry was thrown violently from his horse and lost consciousness for hours. Some say he was never quite the same after that. Others argue it was slower. The gradual accumulation of injuries, diets of roasted meats, and the sheer weight of royal burdens that changed him. You imagine the prince galloping through Hampton Court in springtime. His horse thunders beneath him, his laughter echoing down corridors now sealed to keep in warmth. But even back then, seeds were being sown. A twisted knee here, an ulcerated leg there, and always the weight physical, political, symbolic. He was praised for his appetite, celebrated for his excess, but appetites, left unchecked, have a way of turning on their masters. The court physician's logs, though careful and discreet, note congestion of humors, restricted motion, and the need for gentle purgation. That's Renaissance code for the king was beginning to feel it. You notice how the present echoes the past. In the corner of the bedchamber now, an old riding glove sits half-folded atop a chest. A relic, a reminder. No one dares remove it, but no one touches it either. Even the fireplace seems quieter than before. It crackles with restraint. The young Henry had once danced until dawn. Banquets stretched for hours, filled with musicians and delicacies from all over Europe. But now meals are small and silent. The once lively court has grown still, respectful. Or more truthfully, wary. They say the king's temper grew in step with his waistline. Where once there had been charm and joy, there came outbursts. Brief, sharp, then gone again. Some attributed it to pain, others to paranoia, still others to the crushing solitude of absolute power. You can command armies, rewrite laws, and even redefine your nation's religion, but you can't outrun your own knees. A servant enters the chamber again. This one brings linen. It's folded in precise squares. Not for fashion, not for comfort, just for necessity. Someone murmurs thanks, and you realize that everything in this room has been reduced to function. The court still kneels, but it's not awe anymore. It's choreography. You take a breath. The smell of wood smoke blends with dried herbs now. It's soothing if you let it be. This room contains two Henrys, the one in the bed, and the one who used to fill the halls with laughter. The tension between them is almost audible. One defined an age. The other is the age ending. Time moves differently in this room. Minutes stretch, then fold back on themselves. Even the ticking of a timepiece somewhere beneath the bed curtains feels slower. Or perhaps it's just the way everyone seems to wait. Not for orders, but for inevitabilities. You glance back at the bed, at the massive figure resting there. Henry no longer resembles the man painted on royal banners or minted onto coins. His face is softer now, yes, but not from peace. The years have reshaped it. Jowls rest heavily above his collar. His eyes, when open, sink just slightly under their own weight. Still blue, they say, but no one makes direct eye contact anymore, not unless summoned. And yet he is still king. His legs, you've heard whispered in corridors, are the source of daily worry. Attendants speak in careful tones about treatments and dressings, avoiding more specific words. Even here, truth is gently edited. The smell, faint under incense and rosemary, tells more than anyone will. It's not decay, not exactly, not in the obvious sense. It's something more elusive, a suggestion of imbalance. The body, like the kingdom, is trying to maintain order, and struggling. There's a cushion on the floor where one of his most trusted physicians kneels. He's not praying, not yet. He's thinking, calculating perhaps about what else might be tried. They've rotated mixtures, warm compresses, powdered bark, diluted tinctures, some from the apothecary's shelf, others from hopeful letters sent by minor nobles claiming to know. A miracle balm passed down through their grandmother's scrolls. One treatment involved beeswax infused with thyme. Another, gently applied by candlelight, was a poultice of wine-soaked linen and lavender paste. Each method is recorded. None has reversed the course. You walk slowly toward a small writing desk, tucked behind a velvet divider. There a quiet log is kept. Not the official court diary, but something more personal. Notes written by the steward, part observations, part rituals. The king responded to the poultice with visible discomfort, but calm thereafter. Requested music in the early evening. Harp only. Historians still argue whether these herbal interventions were meant to heal or simply comfort, whether anyone truly believed recovery was possible. Some say the doctors were sincere. Others suggest their remedies were performances, designed not to cure but to show loyalty in the theater of care. And Henry? He's aware. That much is certain. The king has always known how to read the room, especially when it pretends not to look. A chair has been placed near the bed, fitted with cushions and straps, not out of malice, but stability. Shifting weight is difficult now. Movement is limited, slow, and deliberate. One footman carries a tray with tools not of war or ceremony, but support folded cloth, warm water, a small handbell with a dull chime. You notice something curious near the bed's edge. A small wooden box. The kind used for letters, perhaps. It's locked, but there's no attempt to hide it. Inside, some say, are notes the king reads before sleep. Not state papers. Personal things. Verses. Signatures. A sketch of Jane Seymour, lightly drawn in charcoal. He breathes in again, heavier this time. Not with pain, not even discomfort, just the sound of effort. There's no moaning, no crying out. That would not suit a king, but silence has its own vocabulary. In the space between breaths, the kingdom listens. You step back, letting the stillness fill the space again. Somewhere beyond this room, a meal is being prepared, though few will eat. At court, even appetite is deferred in the presence of history being written quietly, one pause at a time. Somewhere in the palace, bells are being polished even though no one plans to ring them. You sense a readiness, not rushed, not declared, just a practiced awareness that ceremony may be needed at a moment's notice. Near the foot of the king's bed, you see it now. A curious chair. Not the grand throne gilded with lions and crosses, but something more peculiar. Its legs are reinforced. Levers and pulleys adorn its sides. It's not meant to impress. It's meant to lift. In recent months, the act of rising from bed has become something closer to a royal engineering project. The king's attendants, some of them young, some aged into their roles, have learned the rhythm of balance and support. One cushions the back, another steadies the arm. A third counts softly, not for the king, but for themselves. The furniture of this room tells a different story than the official tapestries. This is not the realm of war maps or royal feasts. It's the realm of careful adjustments, of silence broken only by creaks of wood and the slow exhale of a sovereign, settling into a different kind of throne. You look toward the corner where a footman folds and refolds a piece of silk. He's been doing it for half an hour, maybe longer. It's not about utility, it's about presence. This is a room where motion replaces speech, where preparation replaces hope. Still, Henry remains alert, not always fully, but enough to register movements. He notices who enters. He tracks who lingers too long or not long enough. That keen political instinct, the one that built alliances, dissolved marriages, and reshaped churches, hasn't faded. If anything, it sharpens as his body falters. Historians still wonder whether Henry's strategic mind was dulled by discomfort, or whether the discomfort simply narrowed his focus to its most essential edges. Whatever the truth, the room bends to him, not because of fear alone, but because of memory. Because even in decline, his presence fills the space. Behind a partition, two members of the Privy Council wait. Their voices are muffled, but their posture is telling. They lean in occasionally, hands folded, eyes trained on the divider like it's a curtain in a theater. They know that at any moment they could be summoned. And if summoned, the words must be measured. Every sentence spoken now carries the weight of legacy. Near the window, sealed tightly against the winter wind, sits a book. Not scripture, not law. A volume of chronicles. Royal births, battles, treaties. It's open to a page about the field of the cloth of gold. You remember it. A grand meeting with Francis II of France. A younger Henry clothed in golden thread, rustling like a knight in a chivalric romance. That day, they say, the tents outshone the sun. And now, the only gold here is embroidered into a cushion faded at its edges. Time has softened everything. You imagine being one of those attendants. You wouldn't speak unless addressed. You wouldn't look up unless required. But you'd feel it. This strange tension between pageantry and care. Between serving a man and serving a memory of that man. Even the instruments on the small side table reflect this duality. A hand mirror sits beside a bell. A document seal beside a cup of broth. Power and vulnerability side by side. As they so often are in the rooms where history turns. You walk once more past the foot of the bed. The king has not moved. But the room breathes around him. Like a court within a court, where the rituals of rule have been replaced with the rituals of endurance. The atmosphere in the chamber holds steady like a long breath no one dares release. Outside, the sounds of the palace are muted, purposeful. Boots on stone tread lightly. Voices carry only in half sentences. Everyone knows the balance here is delicate. Any misstep might fracture the illusion of control. At the far edge of the room, beyond the reach of the firelight, members of the Privy Council are gathering with increased frequency. Not all at once, never officially, but their presence, even in silence, leaves a residue. You see it in the way they pause at the door, glance at one another, and then step in with reverent pace. Each man knows what's coming, but none speak it aloud. There's no declaration, just shared awareness and calculations. Their conversations rarely mention the king directly. Instead, they speak of arrangements, of safeguards, and preparations. You understand. The monarch may still breathe, but the machinery of succession is already creaking into motion. Henry, for his part, allows them their space. Sometimes his eyes follow their movements. Other times he seems to drift. Though whether it's sleep, pain, or strategic silence, no one can say for certain. Historians still debate whether Henry truly relinquished control in his final days, or whether he simply chose not to interrupt the performances unfolding around him. Some diaries describe him as restless, even impatient. Others portray a man content to observe, content to let the next act begin while he lingered in the wings. One morning you notice something new. The king asks to see his seal, not to sign anything urgent. He just wants it near. It rests on a velvet cloth, the edges worn from use, symbols of lions and dragons still intact though faded. The seal sits beside his bed for the next 3 days. No one touches it. In the corner of the room, a scribe waits with blank parchment just in case. A royal clerk without a task is not an idle man. He is a reservoir of readiness. The queen is not often present now. Catherine Parr has been gently moved aside, not from malice but practicality. She's seen him through illness before. This time is different. Her chambers are close by. She is available if summoned, but rarely summoned. One evening, a quiet voice reads a passage of scripture aloud. It's not part of a formal ritual, just a court chaplain offering calm. The king doesn't respond, but when the reading ends, he shifts slightly, an acknowledgement perhaps, or simply the body's slow repositioning against the weight of age. You notice the men near the partition begin to lean in. A counselor coughs quietly into his hand, then returns to stillness. They're waiting too, but not for the king. They're waiting for each other, to see who will speak first, who will name what no one else will. Politics in a palace doesn't sleep even when the king does. These men, bold in parliament, sharp in council, are gentle as cats in this room. They speak in low tones, modulate their footsteps, and defer to the rhythms of care. In another chamber, they may argue fiercely about the boy king's regency. But here they perform the dance of deference. And so the bedchamber holds all of them. A monarch, a memory, and a future being negotiated in looks and lowered voices. The physicians arrive just after midday, their footsteps slow, robes trimmed with fur against the January cold. They carry nothing that clinks or clangs. Their tools are folded into embroidered pouches, their herbs stored in small wax-sealed vials. This is not a moment for drama. This is a performance in carefulness. You watch as they gather by the window, conferring in whispers. One unwraps a parchment, an herbal diagram maybe. Another checks a small hourglass, more for routine than precision. They look like scholars in a library. And perhaps they are. But their book today is the human body. Approaching the king, they nod to the footmen who step aside with practiced grace. No one bows. That ritual has quietly ended. Instead, each man lowers his gaze, speaks softly, and moves only when needed. The pulse is checked, the skin touched. A linen square is gently pressed against his forehead. You observe the care, the reverence not born of awe, but of duty and gravity. These are men who have failed to restore him, but will not fail to serve him. Historians still question the effectiveness of the treatments used during Henry's final weeks. Accounts mention concoctions of rosewater, ground amber, and mint. Some believe they were meant to soothe. Others suggest they were symbolic tokens of hope. Or simply tradition continued because no better option existed. One particularly unusual mixture involved fragments of mother-of-pearl suspended in warm wine. Another treatment required the physicians to gently wrap the legs with cloth steeped in willow bark tea, an early, if accidental, attempt at anti-inflammatory care. Whether these methods helped, no one can say, but they were recorded, and recording matters in a royal court. At the edge of the room, a page turns in the steward's logbook. January 24th. The king took fluid at midday. Received herbal application. Eyes remained closed, but breath even. The word application appears often now. It has replaced treatment. Application implies comfort, not cure. It's a subtle change, but it speaks volumes. You notice that the handbell has been moved closer to the king's reach. It's not rung often, but its presence reassures. A symbol of agency in a world that is slowly slipping from his grasp. The doctors speak softly to one another as they begin to prepare another compress. The scent of chamomile rises faintly. Beneath it, a trace of vinegar. The combination is oddly pleasant, earthy, almost pastoral. If you closed your eyes, you might imagine a spring garden. But here in the fire-lit room, it becomes something else, a kind of pause. A way to mark time. The king stirs gently. One of the physicians adjusts the pillow with surprising tenderness. He does not speak. He simply makes the movement and waits for a nod. When none comes, he returns to stillness. One doctor, slightly younger than the others, consults a pocketbook. You catch a glimpse, a note in Latin about balance and bile. Old wisdom, passed down from Galen and others who never imagined a monarch encased in velvet. Flanked by tension, you step back. The room holds its breath as linen is folded. Herbs return to pouches, and the doctors retreat once more toward the shadows. The work is done for now. The patient is stable for now. The logbook receives one more line. Afternoon, pulse steady. Warmth retained. No discomfort noted. And so it continues. Treatment by ritual. Presence by intention and healing. Perhaps not of the body, but of dignity. Evening has begun to settle across the palace, casting long amber shadows down stone corridors. In the royal bedchamber, the candles have been trimmed, their wicks flickering with gentle consistency. The fire still burns, though lower now, producing more light than heat. You notice the rhythm of the room has shifted. Everything feels slower, even the silences. The king remains in bed, motionless but not absent, his eyes open from time to time, scanning, resting briefly on faces he's seen for decades. Some now older, some new, still learning where to stand. These glances are not commands, but recognitions, brief acknowledgments, memories that haven't quite left. Tonight it seems sleep is elusive. Henry shifts slightly. An attendant is there in an instant, adjusting a pillow, checking the folds of the coverlet. There's no spoken request, but everyone knows the routine. The mechanics of care have become second nature. No one questions what to do, only when to do it. A small harp plays in a nearby room, not for entertainment, but for rhythm. The soft plucking of strings adds shape to the evening. It fills the space between breath and thought. You take a seat, not truly, of course, but your presence hovers like a watchful shadow at the edge of the bed. It's then that you notice something subtle. The king's lips move. Not loud enough to be heard, but steady like recitation or prayer. Perhaps he speaks to no one, or perhaps to those long gone. Historians still debate whether Henry experienced vivid dreams in his final days. Diaries kept by his personal attendants hint at episodes of murmured names, extended silences, and references to events no one else in the room witnessed. One note simply reads, "As spoke of Jane, then of Wolsey," then was still for many hours. It's not terror, not quite, but unease does curl through the chamber, soft as smoke. Names whispered at midnight carry different weight than names spoken by daylight. The past returns in loops, and here in this quiet twilight of a reign, memory and presence begin to blur. Someone places a cloth over the mirror in the far corner. Not superstition exactly, just tradition. In some households, mirrors are covered when death approaches, not to avoid reflection, but to remind the living where to focus. Outside, the wind brushes against the stone. A door creaks shut elsewhere in the palace. Footsteps fade. And inside, the king's breathing grows deeper again, though not quite steady. You imagine what it might be like, carrying the burden of 1,000 decisions, all the treaties, the marriages, the reforms, the names signed in ink and in blood. What is it like when all of that lingers in the corners of your sleep? A servant near the foot of the bed begins to quietly arrange items into a chest. A signet ring, a letter opener, a folded piece of parchment sealed but unsigned. None of it dramatic, all of it ceremonial. The rituals of stewardship. The harp music pauses. A moment of quiet. Then it begins again, same melody, a little slower, and still, the king lies there, not as the ruler once seen astride horses or thundered about in parliament, but as a man, breathing, remembering, and perhaps listening to the echoes of his own life play back to him, one note at a time. Morning returns not with grandeur, but with hush. You notice it in the subtle change of light, cooler now, slipping through the slits between the curtains, casting gentle blue over crimson. Another fire has been laid, and it crackles low, more for continuity than warmth. The room remains in its usual rhythm, measured, muted, and precise. You glance toward the king. His breathing is slower today, but steady. The attendants are quieter still, if that's possible. Movements have become even more fluid, almost choreographed. There's no need for verbal instruction anymore. Everyone understands the sequence, but something has shifted. You feel it in the posture of the counselors waiting beyond the drape, in the way the steward lingers longer over the daily logbook, in the deliberate way the candle snuffers are arranged. No one says it out loud, but you see it. Preparations are no longer just cautious, they're anticipatory. A sealed document is brought into the room, carried carefully. It's handed not to the king, but to the chamberlain. You watch as it's placed on the desk. No wax is broken, not yet, but it waits there, breathing the same air as the rest of the court. It carries weight not in words, but in timing. Later, a boy enters the room. He's no older than 10, dressed in finely pressed garments, eyes wide but composed. His name is Edward. He doesn't approach the bed, not fully. Instead, he pauses a few steps in, flanked by two quiet figures. One is his tutor, the other a page. The boy looks not at the king, but at the seal resting on the velvet cloth beside him. There's no need to speak. He understands that he is being prepared. Historians still discuss whether Edward saw his father during these last days. Some accounts suggest he did, briefly and in silence. Others argue that any appearance was ceremonial, more for those watching than for any emotional closure. Whatever the case, the boy's presence here, however fleeting, speaks volumes. You notice a small shift in the air, like when a storm moves in slowly without wind or thunder. It's not fear. It's focus. Every object in the room has meaning now. The folded linens are no longer just cloth. They are readiness. The water pitchers are no longer routine. They are continuity. The physicians return, but their visit is shorter. They check pulse and temperature, adjust pillows and light coverings. One places a hand briefly on the king's shoulder, then steps back. No announcements. No change in tone. But you feel it, there's nothing new to attempt. Near the hearth, an old minister murmurs a line from scripture. Not a sermon. Just a habit of comfort. The sort of passage one keeps in their pocket for moments that stretch long between decisions. Another letter arrives, handed off to a page. It's marked with a different seal. Foreign, perhaps, but it won't be opened today. Not here, there's no hurry. Not anymore. You turn toward the narrow table near the foot of the bed. A cluster of items has gathered there. Small and telling. A folded handkerchief. A vial of rose oil. A single page torn from an illuminated psalter. These aren't official. They're personal. Mementos, tokens, maybe even offerings. The steward's pen scratches across the logbook. January 25th. Early, no change. Chamber remained quiet. Child visitor present. You step back again, taking in the full room. And for the first time it feels smaller. Not in space, but in tempo. The weight of urgency has been replaced by the slow gravity of legacy. The days are beginning to blur. It's still winter outside, but in this chamber, seasons feel distant. The walls insulate more than heat, they insulate perception. You no longer mark time by sunlight or bells, but by the quiet rituals of motion and care. The way the linens are changed, the way the fire is stirred, the way everyone listens for something they can't quite name. Henry lies in much the same position as before. There's no dramatic shift, no grand pronouncement, just a stillness that deepens. You catch yourself watching for the smallest signs, a twitch of the hand, a breath slightly out of rhythm. But these details now come slowly, if at all. The crown isn't in the room, not the physical one. It's already been placed elsewhere, away from the bedchamber, awaiting its next bearer. Instead, what lingers here is the idea of the crown, heavy, inherited, and soon to be transferred. Someone opens a shutter just slightly to let in a bit of air. The breeze is crisp but not biting. It cuts through the incense, just enough to remind you that the outside world still exists. There's frost on the sill. You wonder when the last time the king saw the sky was. Historians still debate the exact hour Henry passed into unconsciousness. Some records suggest he drifted in and out for 2 full days. Others claim he never fully returned after the morning of the 26th. The truth, as with much in Tudor history, is likely a blend of both memory and hope. You watch as the chamberlain enters with a slow, deliberate pace. He does not speak to the physicians. He simply nods, moves to the corner table, and opens a small ledger. Not the one for health. This is the book of arrangements. He reviews entries with practiced calm. Who is to be summoned? What clothes are to be worn? Which phrases will be said? These details have been prepared for months, perhaps years. Nothing here is improvised. You notice something unusual now. A priest, young and soft-spoken, enters the room holding a small folded cloth. He approaches the bed without fear, without fanfare. What he offers isn't last rites, not yet. It's a simple blessing, not to mark the end, but to mark the closeness of it. The king does not respond, but no one expected him to. In the quiet that follows, the priest sits briefly near the bed. He doesn't pray aloud. Instead, he watches the king in respectful silence. It's not a vigil. It's companionship. And it's enough. Another log entry. January 26th, dusk. Presence of priest. No distress observed. Silence remained. The servants move about more slowly now, their steps somehow quieter than before. Not out of necessity, but instinct. Even those who have served the court for years seem to walk as though the floors are thinner. as though sound itself might crack something sacred. You lean near the fire. It's burning lower, but its glow still dances across the room. Shadows stretch longer across the stone. The walls, lined with embroidered panels, seem to absorb more light than they reflect. The whole room feels like it's folding inward, drawing close. Near the bed, a single candle is left burning after the others are snuffed. It's placed on a small stand, not grand, not symbolic. Just steady. One flame held aloft. The following morning begins without announcement. No bell tolls. No trumpet sounds. The quiet continues, only now it holds a different shape. The air feels heavier, though no one says why. You return to the room, and at first it seems unchanged. The same shadows, the same warmth from the hearth, the same hush that clings to every corner. But then you notice no one is moving. The physicians are present, yes, but seated, not working. The attendants remain, but with nothing in their hands. The steward's pen rests beside the open logbook. It has not been used today, not yet. And the king, the same and not the same. Still in bed, still in place, but still in an entirely new way. No one speaks. This is not the time for words. Instead, heads are lowered. Faces are composed, but unreadable. You get the sense that everyone knows, but no one will name it. Not here, not yet. Historians still debate the precise moment when the king passed. Some believe it occurred before dawn on January 28th. Others point to the evening prior. The ambiguity is not accidental. The announcement of a monarch's death is a tool, carefully timed to support political continuity, and in Tudor England, continuity was survival. A door opens at the far end of the corridor. Two counselors enter, robes adjusted, faces prepared. They do not walk quickly, but they do not pause either. They move with a strange combination of reverence and strategy. One glances toward the king's body just briefly, then to the steward. A nod is exchanged. Still no words. Soon after, the door is closed and barred from the inside. It will remain so until all matters are confirmed. For now, the outside world remains unaware. You look to the bed one more time. The great velvet coverlet has been folded back slightly. The king's hands are crossed neatly as if resting mid-thought. No theatrics. Just finality. In the corner, the harp has been removed. The stool where the musician once sat is empty, pushed aside to clear space. That music will not return. One attendant opens a small chest and withdraws a ceremonial robe. It is not worn, only draped nearby. A symbol, not a garment. A visual line between what was and what will follow. Another item is brought forward. A scroll bearing the king's titles. It's placed gently on the desk and unrolled. The names stretch across the page: Defender of the Faith, King of England and France, Lord of Ireland. So many identities, now past tense. You step back and the stillness grows larger. It's not quiet from fear anymore, but from respect. The kind of stillness that marks the moment between reigns. You remember that the Tudor court was designed for such transitions. Nothing is ever sudden here. Even endings are arranged. A young page is sent quietly through a side door. His task is clear if unspoken. Alert the appropriate offices, but not the public, not yet. There will be time for proclamations, time for mourning attire, time for black banners and royal processions. But not now. Now there is only this room, this soft light. This man who was once a boy on horseback, now wrapped in silence. And though no one says it, you know it. The king is gone. There's something surreal about the hours immediately after a monarch's passing. Though the body remains still, the world around it begins to move in strange, carefully measured ways. Not loudly, not quickly, but with purpose, as if the court has collectively exhaled and now begins inhaling again under new rules. You're still in the room, but the atmosphere has changed. It's no longer reverence alone that hangs in the air. It's action concealed in stillness. The chamber becomes not a place of rest, but a kind of stage reset for the next act. The counselors reappear in greater number now, entering one at a time, never together. Each nods in solemn recognition to the others. They speak in fragments, names, schedules, routes. You notice no one says the king. That title is already moving elsewhere. One of the attendants begins the quiet task of preparing the body. It's not embalming, not yet. That will take place later and elsewhere, but a first necessary step. Garments are laid out, the royal signet removed and wrapped. A thin golden chain, worn in life, is unfastened with care and placed into a box lined with velvet. Historians still debate how much of this process was ritual and how much was driven by practical necessity. The temperature in the room is monitored. The candles are trimmed to avoid excess heat. Incense is burned more heavily now, but not to mask anything unpleasant, simply to maintain the illusion of continuity. The body will not remain here long. A priest enters with 2 assistants. Their task is ceremonial, to bless, to witness, and to remind all present that this transition is not merely political, but spiritual. No grand mass yet, only whispered prayers, and the quiet press of fingers against forehead. Behind a partition, preparations continue. A messenger is dressed in neutral livery, then dispatched with a sealed letter. The recipient? Prince Edward. The message? The kingdom now belongs to him. You turn your attention to the windows, still mostly shuttered. But from a thin crack you see that the sky has cleared. The morning frost is fading. A quiet day begins outside, unaware that England is about to awaken under a new ruler. In the hallway beyond the chamber, servants line up. They're not grieving, not yet, but listening, waiting for word, for signs, for instructions. It's well understood that nothing is to be spoken until the Privy Council says so. Inside, one of the doctors scribbles final notes onto parchment. Not for medical records, but for the Royal Archive. January 28th, shortly before dawn. Majesty entered sleep from which he did not rise. You step further into the chamber and glance at the fireplace. The flames have been lowered almost to embers, but not extinguished. A practical measure, but it feels symbolic too. Near the desk, the royal seal is packed into a small chest. Alongside it, a copy of the king's last will and testament. Not just about property, but about loyalty, about whom he trusted when breath became memory. You catch sight of the steward once more. He is seated now, staring at the open logbook. His quill is in hand, but he hesitates. After a long moment, he writes one line in a different script than the rest. The chamber is now still, and so it is. The great wheels of royal protocol are turning quietly, but unmistakably. Within the stone walls of Whitehall, the stillness of the king's chamber gives way to carefully orchestrated motion. Downstairs, in chambers not draped in velvet, but lined in wood and wax, the funeral committee begins to convene. You follow the procession from a respectful distance. The king's body has not yet begun its journey, but the road is already being paved. First comes the design of the route. The court cartographers and clerks debate which path to take, measuring both symbolic value and practical comfort. The journey will end in Windsor, but every mile must be accounted for. Which towns will be passed in silence, which churches will be marked with flags, and which courtiers will walk beside the carriage. Then come the orders, dozens of them, dispatched to tailors, smiths, candle makers, and musicians. There are horses to dress, standards to prepare, mourning garments to be cut and sewn by hands that have done this before. Inside the bedchamber, the king remains. His body has been dressed in preparation for the vigil, a soft expression on his face now that time has softened every edge. His fingers are interlaced over his chest, and for the first time no one watches for a movement, because none will come. A black velvet cloth now covers the mirror. The harp, once absent, has been returned, but this time, its strings are wrapped in ribbon. It won't be played again, not during this phase. You note the change in tone among the attendants. There's no fear now, no anxiety. What remains is solemn professionalism. These are people trained for moments such as this, however rarely they come. Their task is to protect the image of the king, even after he is no longer able to cast it himself. Historians still wonder whether Henry's final procession was designed more for grief or for control. Many believe it was both, a mourning rite and a message to the people that the monarchy endures, even as monarchs pass. The coffin itself is prepared nearby, crafted from sturdy oak, lined in lead, adorned with royal emblems. Its weight alone requires 6 men to lift it, and even then the effort is evident. No one complains. This is a sacred burden. On the day of departure, the coffin is placed in the center of the chapel for final prayers. A wax effigy of the king fashioned with surprising likeness rests atop it. It's dressed in royal garb, complete with crown and scepter. This is the image that people will see, not the man beneath the wood and cloth. And that, too, is intentional. The room falls into ceremony. The doors are opened. The air, colder than expected, brushes over velvet and wax. Horses wait beyond, cloaked and solemn, their breath visible in the morning chill. The crowd outside has gathered. Ministers, clergy, noblemen, all draped in black. And then the slow procession begins. You walk alongside them not as a participant but as witness. The wheels of the carriage creak. The hooves strike stone. The banners sway with meaning more than motion. You pass familiar sights, bridges, towers, chapels. Each place remembers him differently. To some he was a warrior. To others a builder. To many a symbol too large to fully comprehend. Along the road some bow their heads. Others watch silently. The silence, more than any bell or hymn, becomes the soundtrack of this royal farewell. The king travels now not as ruler but as memory. And memory, you realize, moves slowly, but leaves deep tracks behind. The procession makes its way through the English countryside, long and deliberate, like the final chapter of a book being read aloud. You follow along quiet lanes and through stone arches, past fields left fallow for the season. The royal banners flutter gently from the carriage corners, their fabric dulled by the pale winter light. Each town it passes responds in its own rhythm. In one, church bells toll a single low note. In another, villagers gather in respectful silence. Caps removed, hands pressed over hearts. No voices call out. This is not a moment for acclamation, it is a pageant of stillness. The coffin rests beneath heavy velvet, guarded by knights in ceremonial armor. They ride not for battle now, but for legacy. The wax effigy of the king remains seated above the casket, dressed in full regalia. It does not smile. It does not blink. But it reigns in its own eerie way, still imposing. A portrait come to life and then paused. The weather holds. No rain, no wind, just gray clouds that sit like an unspoken eulogy above the landscape. You notice how carefully the horses are paced, never too fast, never faltering. Their shoes have been burnished to a dull glow. The men who lead them are selected for symmetry. From the roadside it all looks effortless, but behind that effort is choreography worthy of any coronation. At key stops, the coffin is brought into churches prepared in advance. Tapestries are hung, candelabras are placed precisely. Clergy read the same lines from the same book at every station, but each reading carries a slightly different tone. Some voices cracked, some strong, some reverent with awe, others wearied with duty. One town you hear went quiet the entire day. No carts, no hammering. Even the tavern served in whispers. Historians still question whether these moments of pause were dictated from above or volunteered from below. Was it policy or grief? Was it fear or affection? Likely both. The Tudors inspired loyalty with equal parts majesty and menace. The most curious sight of all comes as the procession climbs a shallow ridge approaching Windsor. There, perched on the side of the path, stands a figure cloaked in dark wool. Not noble, not clergy, just an old woman, unmoving. She doesn't bow. She doesn't weep. She simply watches. A guard notices her but does nothing. There's a silent agreement. This, too, is part of the farewell. As the evening falls, torches are lit along the way. Not for visibility alone, but for ritual. The flicker of flame recalls the bonfires that once marked Henry's victories and holidays. Now they mark only the end of a journey. At the final stop, Windsor's chapel looms ahead, stone and shadow, grandeur softened by dusk. The crowd that awaits is different here. Older, more practiced, members of court, clergy, and tradition. Some have stood at royal funerals before. Others will again. The coffin is borne inside. The echo of footsteps on the marble floor is the only sound for a long moment. Then quietly a psalm is sung, slow, soft, almost uncertain. The effigy is removed, carefully lifted by gloved hands. It will be preserved in the records, but not seen again. What remains is the man in silence. The chapel fills with the warm scent of beeswax and pine. Light catches the stained glass. The crown, held aloft by an attendant, does not yet rest anywhere. That moment will come later. You feel the room settle into something that feels final. Not sad, not dramatic, just complete. And as the final prayer is offered, you notice that even the wind outside has gone still. Inside the chapel, shadows cling to the crevices of carved stone, and golden candlelight washes over centuries-old banners. You're now surrounded by the full stillness of finality. The procession has ended. The effigy is removed, and the monarch lies at rest in the heart of Windsor. But the story of a king never ends with burial alone. Even as the mourners filter out, even as the last hymn fades into echo, questions remain about legacy, about memory, and about what is left behind when the crown is passed to younger hands. You walk slowly along the length of the chapel, your steps silent, eyes drawn to the spot where Henry's coffin rests in quiet majesty. There is no monument yet, only temporary adornment, drapes, emblems, guarded reverence, and a silence not to be broken. You may wonder, where is the great tomb? The towering structure of marble and gold, the sculpted angels, the immortal inscriptions. That had been Henry's plan. In life, he commissioned designs for a tomb that would rival any monarch's. Italian artists were consulted, elaborate sketches drawn, funds set aside. It was to include life-size statues and eternal flame, even musical accompaniments that would play through the hours, something that would echo through time as loudly as his reign once did. But it was never built. Historians still argue over why. Some say the money was diverted elsewhere in the political reshuffling that followed. Others believe that his successors, particularly Edward and Mary, had little interest in glorifying the past when the future was so fragile. Still others whisper of unfinished plans, misplaced records, and changing tastes. The truth remains hazy, like so much in the years that followed. Instead, Henry was interred in a vault beneath the floor, next to his third queen, Jane Seymour, the woman who bore him the son he so desperately sought, the woman who, despite dying young, remained his true wife in memory and arrangement. There is no soaring sculpture here, no soaring arch etched with his deeds, just flagstones and silence, and perhaps that in the end suits the complexity of the man. You look down at the brass plate that marks the burial. The inscription is modest, efficient. It names the king, it names the queen, and it leaves the rest unsaid. Outside, preparations have already begun for Edward's coronation. Tapestries are being aired, trumpets tested, royal garments stitched. Life moves on as it must. But within this chapel, within this vault, a different kind of legacy lingers. Not the legacy of laws or declarations, but of unfinished plans. Grand ambitions folded away. A king remembered not by monument, but by memory. You pause a moment longer, letting your breath match the stillness of the chamber. In the end, the place doesn't feel empty. It feels watchful, not haunted, not sacred, just aware. This was once a king who split a country in two, married 6 times, rewrote spiritual laws, and turned fear into policy. And yet here, beneath a simple stone, he is quiet. No crown, no sword, no flame, just stone and time. The chapel gradually empties, though not completely. A few courtiers remain seated in silent vigil, hands folded, eyes lowered. You drift past them, hearing only the gentle hiss of candle wicks and the soft echo of a final hymn still hanging in the ribs of the vaulted ceiling. There's a peaceful weight to this moment, like the closing of a door long held ajar. Outside, the sky has turned to ash. No rain, but the kind of low gray that encourages reflection. The wind moves slowly through the cloisters, lifting banners just slightly, as if reminding them to breathe. Back inside, You watch as the final attendants complete their quiet work. The velvet cloth over the coffin is straightened. A final sign of the cross is made. The door to the inner chapel is gently closed. No latch clicks. It's just closed. What remains now is not the man, but his echo. For the courtiers and counselors, the next chapter begins with paperwork. Wills to be executed, councils to be formed, alliances to be reconsidered. But for you, for this moment, the world pauses. You followed Henry from his final bedchamber to the very stone beneath which he rests. And you realize something curious. The drama is over, but the questions remain. Historians still question how Henry should be remembered. As tyrant or visionary, reformer or destroyer, patron of the arts or architect of dissolution, the truth, as always, is somewhere in the murky in-between. The very existence of that unfinished tomb, planned in marble, now absent in stone, seems to say more than any inscription ever could. He was vast. He was complex. He was in many ways unknowable. Even now, outside in a nearby corridor, two attendants speak quietly about schedules. One mentions a need to polish the canopy for Edward's first court appearance. Another sighs. The rhythm of duty has resumed, but the space you occupy here, the quiet, flickering space of legacy, is still yours to hold, if only for a moment more. You glance one last time toward the brass plate. There's no spotlight, no wreath, no dramatic final chord. Just the stone. Just the stillness. And then you step outside. The air is cold but fresh. The garden nearby, though winter still, carries the faint scent of damp earth and ancient trees. You let that scent ground you. Let it pull you gently back from a time of courts and crowns. The chapel behind you remains closed, but not forgotten. And with that, you let go of the story, not because it's finished, but because it has settled. And now, as we leave the past behind, let your breath begin to slow. Picture the flickering candlelight fading into soft shadow, each flame dimming gently like stars giving way to dawn. The scent of aged wood, the hush of old stone corridors, those linger too, but only as whispers now. You're no longer in a king's chamber, nor walking beside velvet-draped coffins. You're drifting gently into quiet. Feel your body settle. The world is no longer filled with pageantry or procession. No watchers in the hallway. No physicians counting breath. Just stillness. The kind that lives between thoughts, between footsteps, between history's louder pages. Inhale slowly. Let it be like stepping into a warm room, and exhale just as slowly, like drawing the heavy curtain closed at day's end. No banners need raising. No titles need spoken. What's left now is rest. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere beneath your pillow, there lingers the soft echo of a wax effigy smiling ever so faintly in the candlelight. Sweet dreams.